Forseti, the god of justice to the Norse, or the presiding one to the Icelandic. A fitting name for a tome used by today's character. Arguably, no other character in all of Jugdraw has a bigger role in the story than Lewyn. He practically takes the role of what could have been easily played by Oifi, Finn, Shannon. I mean, it makes sense because while each of these characters have various amounts of holy blood, none of these characters truly are the dragon themselves, which Lewyn himself is actually possessed by. This gives him an almost omniscient knowledge to everything that's going to come, leading him to be Selef's advisor throughout the whole generation 2. Oifi, Shannon, and Finn, they really get left in the dust, and they really don't have much time to develop in later chapters, just simply because Lewyn just has all the screen time. He's also Augustus's benefactor, which he must report back to in FE5, which you might remember in Chapter 2. Yeah, so likely Leaf wouldn't have even survived otherwise if it wasn't for Lewyn. Lewyn spawns in Chapter 2 automatically under control of Sigurd's army, which is weird because he's never met anyone in Sigurd's army before, and from a talk conversation that he has with Sigurd in this map, he doesn't even want Sigurd to do anything in this war. He just wants everyone to put their weapons down, which Sigurd agrees to fully, in which Lewyn, surprised by what Sigurd's army is, realizes that he is just in what he's fighting for, and that he will join the army. But besides that, when he's in the village, a bard tells him that he might as well run, because he is surprised that, Lewyn's even still around, because Lewyn, he thinks that the king is going to send in some troops and protect all the villages from the bandits that are attacking right now. And he decides that he's going to fight the bandits himself, because he then learns that it's probably the king who sent the bandits in himself to take over all the villages. So, and then this is when we get a little hint in towards the womanizing side of Lewyn, because a dancer by the name of Sylvia wants to come with him. And he keeps telling her, no, you're not coming with him. I know we went on a couple dates a couple times, but I really only told you that you were cute because I'm a bard and you're a dancer, and that's just the way things are. But she follows him to the front lines regardless, which is something that he really doesn't want. But honestly, they have lover conversations later on in the game. She genuinely really does like him, and I'm really glad that Sylvia comes, because she in herself is a really, really good unit. But meanwhile, in the top right corner of the map, there's another Pegasus Knight. She's looking for a man named Prince Lewyn, who obviously is our Lewyn, but King Chagall, she tells Aranis that, Lewyn is captured by Sigurd's army, and she must go recapture him before he's beheaded by Sigurd, or else he's going to die. So she rushes down there to go, save what she thinks is to save Lewyn. But in reality, Lewyn, he talks to her and tells her, hey, you were tricked, Aranis. You wouldn't survive for a second on your own. Just giving her a hard time, despite that she risked everything in her life to go save him. And then he tells her, hey, listen, if you want me to go home, then you're going to stay with me for a little while, because there's no way I could go home and face my mother yet. I left for a reason. I don't want to be king. I don't want the tome. I don't want anything. All I want is to be me. I want to travel, and I want to be free. But Aranis, she begrudgingly tells him, okay, well, I will stay with you for as long as you need me to, but I don't think I'm going to leave your side. So then Lewyn tells her that Sigurd's army is full of babes that Aranis can learn a couple things from, and she just sits there and takes it. She doesn't retaliate, she just tells him okay. And Lewyn, he jokingly tells her that she should never change, and you'll learn later on that he genuinely does have feelings for her, which is something that melts my heart, because if you think that this here Lewyn guy is a silly person, then once Generation 2 comes, you'll see just how he changes. He has no dialogue whatsoever in Chapter 3. But then Chapter 4, we go to Solis, where he's supposed to be king. Sigurd's talking to Lewyn's mom, and at the end of the conversation, Lewyn butts in, asking her if she forgot about him, and how she talked to Sigurd for hours, but she can't even acknowledge that her own son is in the room. She then gives him some of the old Forseti sass, and asks if he means her son, the one that ran away years ago, not knowing where he was, and that she can't talk to someone who isn't there. She then tells him that she is still mad at him for being so cold-hearted, for making her worry about him. No idea where he was. Lewyn then gives his mom a shoulder rub, saying that he had reasons and that he'll be the perfect son from this point on. But she mistakes this gesture as treating him like an old crone instead of him being the old regular sarcastic Lewyn that we usually has. And she just wants to get away from him as fast as possible at that point. And obviously she wants him to return, but she just can't say it in such a loving manner. This family has issues, and this doesn't even scratch the surface of these issues, because Lewyn, he is father of the year to say the least, greatest dad I have ever seen. Anon, who's the older sister of Aranis, also told Lewyn to not be feared by his mother's outward behavior, and that she was actually very happy to see him. She will then promise to protect his mother with her life, and to carry on with his mother back home. Shortly after the Battle of Tofa, Anon will perish in battle, which Lewyn really makes him feel guilty enough to go home, heartbroken that one of his friends died protecting his mother, which really should have been his job to do, being the king of Salice and being the sole inheritor of Forseti. Lewyn arrives at home after the Battle of Salice, thankful to see his mother still alive, promising her that he will be there for her from now on, and that he will never leave her side. He will then tell his mom that compared to Sigurd, that he is basically a screaming infant with much to learn, and that Sigurd could use his help more than her, in which case she provides him with his birthright, Mom's Forseti, the name of my channel. She gives him the legendary Mom's Forseti. She then reminds him that the Wind Crusader flows with the gentlest breeze. He must guide everyone to peace, and that hate and violence is never the answer. She then wishes him on his way, in which he tells her to take care of himself. Lewyn then, according to Thracia, stands next to Aranis, and then tells her that he used to have a thing for her sister, but that was then, and this is now, and Aranis is the now, and he tells her that he loves her, and then they automatically become lovers. In Chapter 5, his only dialogue comes between the two lover conversations, whether it be Sylvia or Aranis. His and Sylvia's is quite forgettable, because as she just asks him, she still loves him, and what she tells her he does, and that is the reason they're married. Whereas with Aranis, it's more meaningful, where Lewyn makes Aranis promise that no matter what happens, she will go home to his mother, in which she agrees, rapping to her husband's safety, but also saying that being with him has made her childhood dreams come true, because she has always loved him. Lewyn will later then be killed in combat by Archbishop Manfoy himself, in which the tome possesses Lewyn with the spirit of the Wind Crusader, said Forseti. Now, we're going to talk about his kids for a second, because each one of them have their own benefits. Well, two of them have their own benefits. One of them, in my opinion, really isn't that good, and it should not be used. Like, you could easily use it if you want to make Corporal really good, but honestly, he's not really a kid that I would put much thought into. Lewyn can pass the Forseti tome down to three kids: Corporal, Ced, who obviously is my favorite story-wise. Thracia just wouldn't be the same if we didn't have Ced. And for Arthur, who's my favorite gameplay-wise. Arthur arrives right after the first castle conquered in Generation 2. He promotes into a horse-mounted unit in a game where horses are key, and having a weapon with 30 might, 1 to 2 range, 10 skill, 20 mage, and 50 uses is just completely insane. Compared to any other early unit in Fire Emblem history, this kid is just completely broken. He has over 100% growth in 2 stats, and you get him earlier than basically any other of the Holy Blood kids. Then you also have Ced, who everyone who had played FE4 can also tell you he is a pre-promoted sage. He's a perfectly good unit, but unfortunately comes in a halfway into Generation 2. Lastly, you have Corporal, who I think is, without a doubt, the worst of the 3 choices. He can't even use the tome until he promotes, and comes in almost halfway through the second last chapter of Generation 2. Prior to the events of Generation 2, Lewyn will abandon his wife and children to learn more about the cult controlling the Empire, and the resurrection of the Dark Lord Loptir. Lewyn would soon after find a Julia who was wiped of her memories, completely amnesiac. It was also wrote in Kaga's notes that he was a traveling merchant, and that he was also the one who taught Arthur how to use wind magic, which makes it even more coincidental if that was his son. After Genshire was retaken, Lewyn will come back, but you'll quickly realize that his way of speech has completely changed. He's to the point. He also tells Seliph for referring to him as King Lewyn, demanding to never be referred to as a king ever again. Lewyn seems pleased with Seliph that the revolution has started and that Isaac is quite a fitting spot for it to begin. But with that, he only wishes Prince Shannon isn't around due to the hunting of the Belmont. He then asks Seliph if he could take Julia while he attends business in Lancia, which Seliph agrees. Lewyn will then be seen in chapter 14X of Thracia, about halfway through the game after Tara has fallen, only to tell August that he is doing a good job and that he's on the way to Orghill and that he will see him in pretty much a year. Once Sigurd conquers Hyvora Castle, he appears to Seliph to congratulate him. He then explains that it has been in the last 15 years since Arvis has taken over control and the Loptier cult has risen back from the power that has reinstated the murderous child hunts, and although they have tried fighting back, they have failed after every attempt. He then tells Seliph that as Daedra's oldest son, he is the true inheritor of the Grambalian throne, and that he will rely on the people against the Empire one more time. And with the holy blood of Baldur and its weapon Tyrfing, he will have no issue defeating the Empire and gaining his rightful ownership of the throne. At the start of Chapter 7, Lewyn will tell Leif that he must head into the Aid Shrine, where Shannon is to recapture his Belmont, and into the desert. Once in the shrine, Seliph will then notice that there is scratching on the walls belonging to the children, and Lewyn will explain that the cult has been hidden away for so long that the Dark Lords return, and that the only thing that the cult wishes for is is to resurrect the Loptier itself. Lewyn also tells him to consider this a warning. Good and evil can easily be reduced to even simple talk. And while the idea is, if you have hope, there's evil inside of all of us. And if we were to hate anybody, hate the evil that lives inside and not the individual themselves. After the battle for Melgen, Seliph displays regret about killing Ishtar, to which Lewyn justifies it by means of saying, they actively served a brutal tyrant, and anyone who does so is the enemy. And in times of war, there's men, they may just justify fighting evil and those they hate, but they still remind Seliph that he's a good man and that he must focus on the goal to save Lonstar and Leif's army as a far cry of the man who wanted Seliph. And that is a far cry from the man who wanted Seliph to stop fighting when they first met him in Chapter 2. Falling back to Darna to save Ares and Lyn, Lewyn explains in the peak of the Holy War, Darna was the last bastion of hope for humanity. 12 gods came from the sky who shared their blood into 12 crusaders, leading to the holy blood that is in use of all the holy families today. After the Battle of Ulster, despite Bloom escaping, Lewyn tells Seliph to keep his head up because he was the first hope the Thracian people had, and they would eagerly support him, and that this was them getting their feet into the Thracian peninsula for the first time. At the start of Chapter 8, Lewyn convinces Seliph to take the fight to Bloom, but to keep forces at both castles to increase just in case there is an invasion. After Knout, Lewyn tells Seliph they made a major blow to the Empire, and that Thracia is still going to be the main issue. Explain that even though Thracia is natural, Trevenant is ruthless, and that those who killed Leif's parents, who were Seliph's aunt and uncle, the Thracian and the starving people, Lewyn explains, were just eating is a task, and that men must train in mercenary work just to ensure the survival of their families and keeping them fed. But no amount of poverty could justify the savageness of their army. One of the first examples of Lewyn's detachment of his family comes if you stand Seliph next to Sid and talk to him. Before the chapter ends, Sid, if Lewyn is his dad, will recognize his father and gets very angry after he nonchalantly tells him it's been a while. But when Lewyn asks Sid how Aaron is, Sid instantly gets upset, explaining that their mother has died, in which Lewyn can only reply with, such a shame, a far cry to the man who told her he loved her in the middle of a battlefield in Chapter 4. Sid, wondering why his father is incapable of emotion, how he just told him his wife is dead and won't cry nor acknowledge his daughter, who even refuses to talk to him, in which Lewyn says, I left my old life long ago, and that goes for my wife and kids as well, hinting that Lewyn is no longer Lewyn that we knew him in Generation 1, and that he is more possessed by Forseti than we originally thought. In Chapter 9, Lewyn warns Seliph that the Draco Knights are coming, and reinforcements are to continue moving. But Seliph was reluctant to fight due to the poor state of the Thracian army, but Lewyn snaps at him, saying, This is a war, and if you can't handle it, then you could just run back home, making Oifi interject that the young Seliph is just tired and stressed. Lewyn appears to understand, but reminds him that both the Loptir is about to be resurrected, and that the world would be ending if they didn't stop the cult. It is also confirmed that Lewyn has been sending multiple convoys asking a truce, but Arion would not respond due to pride of being a Dragon Knight, and that he wishes Arion would move wise into putting him on. At the start of Chapter 10, Lewyn regrets to inform Seliph that Julia has been captured for reasons even unknown to him, but they must leave the country due to the children, who are sure to die if they didn't leave immediately. Sadly, after entering Kranos, Lewyn fails to find the children, predicting that they have already been sent to Miletos, where they would also seize Radus, which was easily due despite turning the entire town into a ghost town. Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied. The Dark Mages turned Kranos into a giant ghost town. Once again, after arriving to Miletos, they discover that the children to be gone, and that the next castle they must conquer is Chelphi, the homeland to Seliph and his army, Sigurd and his army, which is Seliph's birthright. But the people there should take Seliph in with open arms, due to it being naturally his family's. Before the final castle, Lewyn can have a conversation with 3 of his potential daughters. Fee will first not respond to Lewyn until he calls her stubborn. He then informs her that he's trying to apologize to her, but she lays into him, saying that he's a monster. All she wanted was to talk to him, but she wouldn't even look at him, telling her that he made her cry and that she resents that he shunned her. He then repeats that she's a bratty little thing, in which she tells him he regrets her having married his mother, marrying such an awful man like him, and that he just tells her that she instead have no right to be mad, and that the war should be the only thing that they worry about. With Lewyn, he pretty much just tells her that her father is always watching her despite not knowing who her dad even was. He never does tell her that he is her father, however, but Lewyn feels he should know who her parents were because he knows everything. But what he does tell her is that her parents loved each other very much and only parted due to the Battle of Valhalla. With Teeny, however, we see more of Lewyn come out than we do in any other conversation in Generation 2. The conversation starts with Lewyn telling Teeny that she must find it hard in the battlefield, with Queen Hilda being her aunt. But Teeny tells her Hilda was an evil person who would beat her and call her names for her mother's treachery. So she further explains that her father was killed in the Battle of Valhalla, unbeknownst that her father is standing right in front of her. We were taken to Ulster by force by King Bloom's men. That's where my mother died. Lewyn actually starts to cry, asking her if she ever had it easy. Teen just says she was thankful for her mom for keeping her safe, and how Talatu would constantly cry and return by asking Lewyn if he's alright, due to the appearance of his tears, which he plays off as just sweat. After the death of Arvis, Lewyn shows Seliph that the people of Chelphi were cheering for him, but he found out that Manfroy was the one who seized Julia, and that she was more than likely held in Granville. But the last battle was about to begin. He also teases Seliph about having a little thing for him. Meanwhile, Lewyn explains that this is the final holy war, and because of Julius's Loptirian blood, he must be stopped. Seliph begins to wonder about Lewyn's knowledge on everything, and why he's being left in the dark. Lewyn has a total Charlie Kelly moment, and explains that he himself has been traveling for over a decade on a journey to find out the bigger picture. He explains that the founder of the Loptirian cult, Gale, dedicated his entire youth to exploring a voyage across the seas, desiring nothing but to drink the blood of a legendary beast. Even if a single drop he believed would bestow any human limitless power. When Gale returned to Jugdraw, he wielded strange, only bizarre powers nobody could understand. With these powers, he began swaying the youth across the land to aid him. Loptis was the dragon himself, and each of Gale's hairs has the blood of the dragonkin. After the battle of Castle Dazzle, Lewyn then curses the idiocy that Lombard and that he was the reason the world was in this mess. Unable to wait any longer to hear Lewyn's words on where the Crusaders' power comes, Lewyn explains, I can't say for sure, but wherever they were, they realized that our lands of misery were caused by the power of the Dragonkin. They came to Jugdraw and for the sole purpose to save the human race. It was them who appeared in Darna when death seemed certain. The gods took human shapes with 12 chosen warriors. The gods bound themselves in a blood covenant. Long story short, the gods we know in scripture, just like Loptis, with just a single taste of the blood of dragons. These humble warriors became the 12 crusaders. Each dragon presented a weapon, steeped into their own blood and power. Then, with some parting words, the dragonkin departed Jugdraw. Only Naga's blood would be strong enough to defeat Loptis. Only the daughter of Daedra would be able to defeat Julius, with that person being Julia, Selef's sister, who upon to that very moment he didn't know that they were even related, and that she was also Julius's twin. Lewyn is also the one to get Julia to put her circlet into the sealed case in Valhalla, granting the power of Naga to her and to defeat Julius. After Julius's death, Lewyn congratulates Selef, and the only way to heal the world is so everyone to work together. Together they will notice a new world where Selef, soon to be king, can carry on the will of the people who died, and that the first task will be to thank everyone for everything that they have done. He will explicitly thank the Thracian leaders for the hard job that they're about to have due to the north and the south being separated for so long. He then also thanks Shannon, who he's also known for about 17 years at that point. Lewyn also confirms that Augustria in Chapter 2's area is still embroiled in a civil war due to the greedy kings in the area. The last person to leave will also be whoever inherited Forseti. Thanking Lewyn will finally come home now that the war is over, in which Selef says he's envious to have a dad as amazing as what Lewyn is. Proud to be his son and wanting to be just like him, but Lewyn shoots him down, saying that he's not coming home with his son and that his son will be king. Almost in tears, he tells his son to go and be gone. The leadership of Salis needs to change. Selef thanks Lewyn for caring for the young warriors and guiding them into who they are now. Lewyn then tells Selef that he is the wind that shines in all their hearts. This makes Selef thank Lewyn, finally piecing together that Lewyn was Forseti all along, and that despite being Dragonkin, going against all logic and giving them to where normally his kids never would, or his kind never would. In his final appearance, Selef says, so long as your world lives on, humanity will never forget your kindness, Lewyn, a hero of a distant land, Forseti of the Wind.